have 2 speakers and a panel of 3 resource people now moving into our Q&A section. So I'll introduce Jenifer at the end of the table. Jenifer's a former lawyer, and this is, I'm not making this up, I'm reading exactly what they sent me. A former lawyer who proofreads non-fiction books when she is not busy chasing her 2 small children. There we are. She has a child at Simon Fraser Elementary, where she's the DPAC rep, and another in preschool, and is a co-founder of Families Against Cuts to Education, and a member of the PAN Steering Committee. Oh my goodness, and has been a member of DPAC, Vancouver DPAC as well. So, wow, busy. And so the question is, how much of these costs are being downloaded onto parents? I assume that meant fees and not fundraising, or both? Fees? Fees.
But fundraising too, I mean, I know
right.
how much I contribute to bake sales and how much,
right.
you know, every week my kids ask for this and that.
So that's the question, is has anybody quantified that?
Hi there. I don't know the exact answer to that question, but I think that there are several trustees in the room who may be able to point you in the direction of what, because I think what you would be looking at is what cost savings are they making by canceling those programs. And then obviously not every parent can afford to make up for the loss of band and strings by providing music lessons to their child. Just for example, it might be a matter of cost. It may also be a matter of time. Parents are working hard and may not have time to take their child to these extracurricular activities. So what we're seeing generally, and there was an article in the Tyee all about fundraising and how we are seeing inequities grow from school to school, because we are now in the situation where, depending on the neighborhood in which you live, your child may get different services because your PAC has fundraised for them. And so a child whose parents are not able, for whatever reason, to contribute to the fundraising, or whose school doesn't have a functioning PAC, is getting fewer services and less variety. And even things like library books are being bought with PAC fundraising money. And so you have schools with under-supplied libraries, or even books in the classroom that are out of date or just not there. And it's you're seeing differences from neighborhood to neighborhood, and that is exactly the opposite of the purpose of public education. Public education is meant to be the great leveler. Public education is meant to provide the same high-quality experience to all children, regardless of their home circumstances, and not punish them for their home circumstances. And we are sadly in this tiered system of public schools offering different services depending on how much the parents can supply. And unfortunately, we are going to see that so much more now that this $21.8 million of cuts is happening, because there's going to be even fewer aides in the classroom. There's going to be fewer things like band and strings. There's going to be fewer career counselors. Things that we might take for granted, and they are just not going to be there anymore. And parents are either going to have to make that up, or kids are going to go without. So this is a prime example of the situation that we're in with tiered schools.
Is anyone familiar with a group called People for Education in Ontario? Oh, okay, one. All right, so I'm going to tell you about it because there's only a few people in the room. So People for Education is, I would call it, a citizen-based research group that was an advocate, or started as an advocacy response to the cuts that happened in the Mike Harris government. And they did a really interesting thing. They started something called a school tracking survey. And they counted things. They started, I believe, in Toronto, and they worked their way out. And they counted how many specialists, school specialists in the school, how many fees are being charged, where are the fees being charged, how much are parents fundraising. And they took them a while, took them about 5-6 years to get really significant and good data, but they proved the point because the counting was happening at a school level. So they weren't looking at these, big big data, and they were able to compare, for example, how many teacher librarians were being cut on a year-over-year basis, how many counselors were being cut. And it was a very, very helpful advocacy tool that contributed to turning the tide in Ontario, actually, if you go back and remember those years. We did this in Vancouver through the BC Society for Public Education, and we weren't able to continue the work year over year over year. Unfortunately, it's very labor intensive. But even in the 1 year that we did it, we discovered that parents on the fundraising side, not the fees side, just the fundraising side, were fundraising just under $1 million a year in the secondary schools. That's just the secondary schools that we tracked. So there's a lot of benefit in gathering that data so that it moves beyond what we know is true anecdotally, but it backs it up. So there's a project for someone. Just anyway, it's also go check out their website if you haven't already. They've done some awesome work in Ontario. I've got Noel next, and then sure. The question is, how do we reach a broader audience than just the folks who have kids in schools, and how do we make it a salient issue for them as we head into the election? Was that right? Okay.
Hi, well, my group is called Families Against Cuts to Education BC. So there's a couple of ways that we differ from the Parent Advocacy Network, which I'm also a member of. That the Parent Advocacy Network grew out of a focus on Vancouver and obviously addresses province-wide issues, but also, addresses Vancouver-specific issues. Families Against Cuts to Education is aimed more at the broader provincial issues, and we tend to focus on funding rather than any other sort of issues related to education. And we also have reached out and strongly encourage anyone who cares about education to join us. It's families, it's not parents. We have heard from many, many grandparents. That is an untapped resource that we really need to reach out to because, first of all, we know that older people vote, and we know that they are a voice that politicians listen to. And also, we need to point out to them that you may not any longer have a child in school, but you have grandchildren in school, and this affects you that way. And we also approach it in a broader sense, which Andrea talked about, which this is a social good that we're talking about. You don't need to be a parent, you don't need to know any kids to care about public education for your own self-interest, for your own interest as when you retire and you need people who are paying taxes to assist you, right? You want to have an educated populace. You want to live in a prosperous, well-educated society. And that is one of our central messages. And we invite everyone to join us who cares about public education. And we are nonpartisan. We're not trying to support any one party. What we are trying to do is change policy. It shouldn't take an election to make a change that is necessary, right? We want the general public to join us in saying we care about public education, not because we're parents, but because we're community members. And so I encourage you to, spread the word to anyone you know. Send them our website. It's facebc.wordpress.com, or follow us on Twitter. We try and spread information that is broadly applicable across the province and to anyone, not just to parents.
Thank you. So someone just flashed a sign at me from the door, and I'll be perfectly frank, I can't read it from here. But I'm going to take an educated guess that it is time to wrap up this part of the evening. I want to thank all of you very, very much for coming out, regardless of what your relationship is to schools and to children. They are our future. They are our best investment. We all know that. And I suspect this is going to be one of a number of meetings that will be held in Vancouver as we go into the school year and throughout the school year. So thank you very much to PAN and to FACE, the organizers, and to Alex for the information. It was very, very helpful. Thank you all very much for coming.